So, I remember back when I was at high school teaching math, and we were told, hey, we're going to do this new thing called PLC, and we were put in a group of people who were teaching the same subject, and we were said, hey, you're going to have a shared mission and a shared vision, and you're going to improve student learning. And we were like, well, how are we supposed to do it? Well, just look at some data and make some decisions is kind of what I remember being told, and it kind of turned into a, well, how did our kids do on the test last year? What did you, oh, you scored better on that problem than I did, so what did you do in your teaching? Okay, well, I might try that, and then we kind of all went back to our rooms, and we did whatever we wanted to do, and came back the next year and looked at the same problems again. And what we were lacking was this data team, because what we're learning now is data teams, they provide that structure that the PLC needed to be able to collaborate as teachers and really positively impact that student learning was a purpose. And the idea is if PLC is what we're doing, the data teams is how we're supposed to go about doing it. So really the purpose, we want to improve teaching and learning, and it really is to accelerate the learning and accelerate it on a continuous basis. And one big goal of data teams is to really improve that instructional practice, regardless of your role. So regardless of whether you're an administrator or a teacher or a support provider in the classroom, if you're part of that data team, we're working for a common shared vision and a common shared way to improve the learning and the teaching going on into the classrooms. And we have our first step.
Okay, so as part of the first step in this process, as a PLC, we are operating as a data team, and our PLC focuses on science, grade level science. So in that, as the leader of our team, I gathered together data from each of the teachers with a common work sample with a formative assessment, and we came back together and we actually charted the data so that we focused on specific needs of students, looking at where everything is. So on this pre-assessment formative data, we looked at grade level and number of students and where they are and what intervention level. So on the next slide here, this shows our slide of how the data was disaggregated out. And so we have it by each of the teacher as we brought together our work samples, how students had done on the pre-formative assessment that was common between all of us. And it's broken out by how many number of students in the course and how they actually scored between proficient or higher, close to proficient, far but likely, or the number needing intervention. And what we found with the trend is that most students scored in the far but likely area, in this area, which leads us to our next step in the process.
All right, so step 2, analyze data and prioritize needs. So looking at that data, we wanted to actually look at student work. So if you, and we're going to look at examined papers. So for students who are able to do what was asked of them, those are the students' strengths. For what students are missing, which become the obstacles or challenges. So in our chart, there was obstacles and challenges. What they weren't able to do are those. The challenges become the focus for teaching that unit, so you can push those below proficient students to above proficient. We also wanted to identify errors and misconceptions, because it can be something that simple that can clear up the obstacle or challenge at hand. Okay, on our next chart, we've broke down, and I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but for proficient, we have the strengths and what are those next steps, because when a student is at the level they should be at, right, we want them to still progress as a learner, so what do they need to do that? Inferences, we talked about, our unit was on lunar eclipses, and how the moon and the sun and the earth and which orbits which for different patterns. So students have not learned specific locations that cause an eclipse to occur. What we noticed was an inference about students who were proficient. Close to proficient, we still have our strengths, but now we have those errors and misconceptions, so students don't know that the moon and earth relationship and the pattern that exists. Then as you go to far but likely, students know the objects that orbit and move, but they think that seasons are dependent on position and not on the tilt of the earth. And then lastly, our intervention, we have strengths, but what are our next steps for those students as well? We want them to understand goal is we really want to reach all of these students to move them up to be proficient.
Step 3, set a SMART goal. So a SMART goal is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So it's an opportunity to make progression, and as Jeff mentioned, it provides the structure needed in order to move the group forward with a common goal. So our example for step 3, we were talking about lunar eclipses, is related to 8th grade students developing modeling of sun moon phases to describe the cyclical patterns of lunar phases. So we have the goal listed and then the amount we want it to increase. And I think what's really important in some of these is the time-bound portion of things, because in some cases that encourages the acceleration that we're talking about because it's linked specifically to a period of time. So again, specific, measurable with the amount, achievable, relevant, and timely.
So once we have collected our data, we have analyzed the data and identified the important needs and created a SMART goal, we are now going to identify the instructional strategies that we're going to do to meet each student's needs, from proficient all the way to our intervention kids. Our focus there is to identify the instructional needs that will be used for each group based on their need. Identify the time and materials needed as well as a specific assignment in order to increase the understanding and the continuation of learning. This could be accomplished by using the following questions. What concepts are the focus of the specific time period? Here are we talking within a unit? Are we talking a quarter, a month? What are the students' intervention needs? What strategies will you implement to have a greater impact on student achievements for all levels? And keeping in mind the effective teaching strategies, what techniques will you select to focus on? Which strategies will help the most students and maximize learning for all? The example that we used, starting with our proficient group, the way that we break this up is to have a high and a low kid. And the high kid is going with a warm-up and a brainstorm, grasping of what we want them to know, and also as a teacher to have a formative assessment, then direct the instructions, exactly tell them what exactly we were expecting of them. Class discussion to guide students, make sure that everyone is on the same page. Then the teacher will model how to do it, and then they'll do a small group activity. So with their partners, they will be actually holding up their moon phases and explaining to their partner what they are seeing. Time needed about 50 minutes, materials, and the assignment that is expected of them. For the next group is our close and far but likely. Depending on their strengths, they would either be the high or the low kid. Most likely, when I say a low kid, meaning that they will, after they've been given instruction by the teacher, after it has been modeled by the proficient student, then it will be their turn to not only draw what's happening, but also then their turn to perform the task. They will, some key things, again, they will do the same warm-up and brainstorm to focus their ideas, direct instruction, class discussion, modeling, and a small group. They will have the same materials and assignments as the other students. And for intervention students, again, it's very important for them to listen to a student do the actual assignment first, and then they will have their own chart there to check their own work. So that way that they've actually heard it, modeled it about 2 or 3 times, so multiple times. Again, they will have the same materials, but with their assignment, they are checking their work based on what their higher student has already done in comparison of their own, and they're working with somebody so that they have that extra resource there.
Alright, so step 5 is determining results indicators using the if-then statement. And so with this, we're really looking at our instructional core and figuring out what the kids are doing, what the teacher is doing with the content that we have, and how we're going to move these kids along to the next level for them. And so with this, using the if-then statement works quite well to figure out what the teacher and students will do. And we look at this, we're actually gonna look at whether the strategy is actually being implemented and if the strategy is having the intended effect on student learning and improved performance when we do this. So on the next one, this was our overall statement. If students use manipulatives to draw models, then they will be able to predict the next moon phase based on what they observed at night. So when we break this down, we start out with our proficient and above, looking at what is needed. We're going to use manipulatives to create a model, and the selected strategy is they're going to create their own model. And what we would hope the teacher is doing is monitoring student conversations and checking their drawings, and what we would hope the students would be doing. If they're proficient and above, they'll be able to do all of these things that you see here, which is to name the moon phases and use their cards to identify patterns, but they're also going to be able to teach other students in this process. And what we're looking for in their work is that the model was created correctly using the cards that they were given for that. That goes to the next group of kids, the close and far but likely. And once again, they'll be able to do everything that the proficient can do, except we do not expect them to teach the lesson to other kids. And it's the same for our intervention on the next slide too. As long as they can get through and use their cards to help them, we're okay with that at this level for this task.
And that takes us to step 6, which I really like this model as it shows step 6 surrounding the entire process, because it is something that's ongoing. It's not part of the 5 steps in the meeting, it's what you're doing as you're starting to implement your strategies, that constant conversation with teachers that you're working with. How is it going? Are we meeting our goal? Are we going to reach our timeline? How are the students doing? Do we have anything we need to change? It gives you the opportunity to say, hey, let's call a meeting, because we're halfway through our timeline and it's not going the way we wanted it to go. We need to pull back together and maybe start this again or come up with some new strategies. For example, in our case, if teachers see that students' models of the moon and earth relationship are not being developed the way we were hoping, we may have to say, well, maybe we have a video that we're going to show them of the moon changing phases so that they can see that, because maybe the way we were asking them to look at it in class wasn't working, or maybe we need to, at this point, change to some direct instruction so that we can push them a little quicker along, or even allow more time for the investigation. Maybe we thought they only needed a couple of days to do an investigation. They need a little bit more time to play with it and fiddle around with it to be more successful. And that constant monitoring is a huge part of this process. Otherwise, it just turns into, again, the day we met, we decided what we're going to do, we go off in our rooms and we try it, and we come back and how did it go, how did it go, how did it go? We need to be talking the whole time. And I think as you look at this, you see that this data-driven decision-making, or this data teams, it's more than just something that you do. It's a mindset that you have to have, because it is that continuous cycle over and over and over. It's a never-ending cycle of looking at data, making decisions, and you start to see that the data team isn't what you're doing, it's actually what you are.